Most things that relate to health and disease or longevity is about timing. For example, diabetes is a disease of mistiming because this is a case where the glucose continues to rise for longer time and takes longer time to come down.
Right.
In humans, if you bring healthy humans and then disrupt their circadian rhythm or reduce their sleep to from 8 hours to say 5 hours or less, then within a week or so, they will develop sign of pre-diabetes. Almost every high school student or college student becomes a sleep worker because they have irregular sleep wake cycle and they're sleepless. Every new mother is a shift worker. Actually, they're worse because the shift workers get days off, the new moms never get a day off. So then the question is, are they more prone to disease?
The magic bullet for everybody these days is fix what you eat. Usually everybody thinks, can you do a time restricted eating, or you pick up certain food or certain types of food or nutrition supplement. How much these things would affect circadian rhythm, which is disordered because of this change in our time shifts?
Welcome to Biopeak Live, brought to you by Longevity India, where we discuss all things health and longevity. I have with me today my co-host, Deepak Sani.
Hello, everyone. I'm Deepak, and I'm the co-host for this Biopic Live podcast. And today we have the distinguished privilege of hosting Dr. Satchin Panda. Welcome, Dr. Sachin, and thank you for taking time to coming to this Biopic Live podcast. Before we begin, a quick introduction, Dr. Sachin. And Dr. Sachin happens to have worked at two great institutes from Scripps and at Salk. And right now he's at Salk Institute in California, and he's doing some fundamental groundbreaking stuff on circadian rhythms. And that's what's going to be the topic of today's podcast. Prashant, off to you.
Welcome to Bangalore, specifically. This is my hometown.
Yeah.
So it's really a privilege to have you here, and hopefully one of your many visits to build a very close bridge between, I think, the two worlds. And I think we should do more of this.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
So wanted to start off just maybe getting a little bit of, how did you get where you got to with circadian rhythms? And of course, that culminated in the Circadian Code book at some level. But after your PhD, really what was the trajectory that kind of, you got into this new space and very, very novel in terms of timing and uh, very apt in terms of what I think people saw value in.
I think you already used the right word, the timing. Um, if you look at most of biology is about what a gene or molecule does. But most things that relate to health and disease or longevity is about timing. So for example, starting from very simple things like sleep. If you don't sleep enough number of hours, then you feel crappy the next day.
Yeah.
Similarly, many of the diseases are also disease of time. So, for example, diabetes is a disease of mistiming because this is a case where the continues to rise for longer time and takes longer time to come down.
Right.
Similarly, cancer is a disease of mistiming because the cells begin to divide much faster than the usual time of 18 to 24 hours. They just begin to divide 2 hours or 3 hours faster. Similarly, many neurological diseases are mistiming, misfiring of neurons. They are firing at either higher frequency or lower frequency. So, right after undergrad, I was actually thinking of the broader concept of biology of time, how biological systems measure time, remember time, and how they actually even measure time in the environment and decide when to do what. Even plants, they will measure time every single day and then will decide to open the flower or drop the flower at certain time of the day. And if you think about it, even food production is tightly tied to flowering time and when pollinators come and do all that stuff. So if you dial back maybe 30 years ago, nobody was thinking about biology of time. And then when I thought about biology of time, circadian rhythm or this universal principle of 24 hours rhythm is very universal. It's present in bacteria, fungus, come all the way to humans. and the principles seem to be very conserved. So that attracted me. And then we realized that slowly that almost every plants, animals on this planet have circadian rhythm, so which are 24 hours timetable of every single gene, hormones, metabolites, everything going up and down. And that really helps us to adapt to these 24-hour cycles of light and darkness, warm and coolness, and presence of food, absence of food, of predators and prey. So that's how I think that's a long answer to how
So,
I got to.
so this, in some sense, that was already. So it's not that the night and day kind of drives this clock, or the the function of this clock kind of is irrespective of
Yeah,
the
the function of the clock is irrespective of light and darkness because starting from 18th century, people actually figured out that if you take a plant, if there is a famous scientist, French scientist who figured out that if you put a plant in the basement with no access to lighting, still the plant would open or close its lids. But if you ask what are the fundamental functions or utility of having a clock, uh, one aspect of clock is to anticipate time and to get ready to do that thing. So, for example, if I don't have a clock and I'm driven by environmental factors, then I would look at the traffic and see when traffic picks up, and that's when I'll start to go to office. Well, it's not going to break my job, but if I'm late every single day, then I won't get my promotion. So, similarly, anticipating time is a very big factor in biology because in the wild, the animal has to anticipate when the sun is going to set, and before that, the deer or the cow has to come back to the set place. Second is separation of incompatible process, and the best simple example that we can relate is every day we should have bowel movement regularly, and every day we should also sleep. We should not do bowel movement in our sleep. So that's how incompatible processes are separated from physiological state down to even inside the cell. Very fundamental principle of circadian rhythm that we find in unicellular organism is the fixation of nitrogen and splitting of water. So fixing carbon and fixing nitrogen. These two processes are absolutely fundamental to living things on this planet. Nitrogen fixation cannot occur in the presence of oxygen, whereas hydrogen splitting requires photosynthesis, right? Produces oxygen. So, in many cyanobacteria and the primitive species, there is a clear separation of nitrogen fixation and oxygen or carbohydrate production driven by circadian clock. And then the third one is alignment of compatible processes to the same time. So, for example, when you're active, we should be feeling hungry. So, similarly, in cellular processes that happen. So, these help us to have circadian rhythm.
That's very interesting insights, Panda. That like what if you believe what I think we were saying is, what you're saying is that there is a rhythm.
Yeah.
And there's a rhythm.
rhythm is a genetically preserved.
Which is there hardwired from plants to bacteria to human. Now, coming with your background, your history, and if you think that something is conserved from bacteria all the way to human, is there some single gene you can say that's what drives it? So, do we have a clock gene? Do we have a rhythm gene in our body which we can harness to understand our biology better?
Yeah. So, actually, in the last 50 years, there are quite a few discoveries in this field, particularly the genes, and not only genes, how they function. Because, as I said, this is a very different kind of rhythm because in many feedback mechanism where things go up and then they shut down their own process, those cannot self-sustain in constant conditions. Suppose, like I said, in constant darkness, a plant has to continue its clock. And even if you isolate me in this room without any cue to light and darkness, I would still continue to sleep and wake up at regular time. So that mechanism, how these genes interact to create a 24-hour loop, that was very mind-boggling, and that's why the discovery of that mechanism led to the Nobel Prize for three scientists in this. Coming back to the same genes, it's actually not the same genes, but different genes that are present in say, cyanobacteria, different set of genes in plants, different sets of genes in animals. but the fundamental mechanism is the same. So that's really surprising to see different genes, but the same mechanism.
Yeah,
That
very
opposites.
interesting. So that's very interesting. So now, if you say these genes are, we can call them the homologous genes, they originated independently, and they still do the some fundamental functions. Now, something you mentioned in the, when we started, is that you want your gut to respond in X amount of time, X time on the day,
Yeah.
but you do not want your sleep to respond at that time of the day. That means there is some sort of a asynchronous response of these genes. They are actually in like a different phases of response. So, do you have this tissue specific response of these genes in our body?
No, actually, what happens is the phase of the clock. So what happens is there are these clock genes, and you can think of one gene, for example, period gene, which is conserved between insects and humans. Its levels go up, and then after a certain amount of time, then it will shut down its own production. It's almost like I don't know what a feedback loop. So that's such. So initially, just like you said, we thought that the clocks in different organ, the clocks may be rising and falling or in different flying. But actually, what we found surprisingly is almost in every organ, the clock is the same. It rises and falls at the same time, but the downstream genes, the genes they regulate, are different in different organs. So, for example, when it comes to gut or maybe, um, for bowel movement, the muscle contraction and peristalsis that is required, the genes required for that, they get activated at certain time. Whereas in our skeletal muscle in our legs and hands, the muscle function optimizes towards the end of the day, whereas the bowel movement is towards the beginning of the day, sir.
And Sachin, is there like all dynamic biological systems? Are there other hormonal triggers or other kind of uh, conspirators, so to speak, that make this entire clocks work?
Yeah, so for the clocks to work and to be useful, they have to respond to different signals. Yeah. So the best example is, suppose say the sun actually rises slightly different time on different days because of the tilt of the planet. So that's why the clock has to sense light and accordingly reset every single day to anticipate sunrise accurately for the next day in nature. Of course, for us, it's not happening. So similarly, when we eat breakfast habitually at 7 o'clock every single day, then you'd see that you are beginning to feel hungry around 6:30, 6:45. Yeah. But suppose you move to a different place or your lifestyle changed and you started to eat at 9 o'clock, then after a week or so, you'll begin to feel hungry at 8:45. So that means the food timing must be sensed by the clock, and the clock has to anticipate feeding at different time. So similarly, many aspects of physiology work that way. So that means the clocks not only regulate stuff, they also have to be sensitive in the stuff that they do. So along that line, hormones are kind of interesting because hormones are messengers that go from one place to another. So hormones play a role. So many hormones directly or indirectly feedback on the clock. For example, hunger and satiety hormones, they can indirectly feedback on the clock. But in terms of real molecules that can have huge impact, actually our core body temperature change has a huge impact on our clock. So even though our core body temperature changes by only zero point 0.5 degree or 1 degree between peak and trough, that can synchronize all the clock. Similarly, stress hormone cortisol can reset some clocks. So then what happens is at the end, the clocks are getting different signals from different molecules, and then they have to take the net signal and accordingly adjust. So that's why it's also very difficult to change the clock. So that means, suppose say, as I said, if I am flying from US to here 12-hour shift, then it will take me almost 12 days to reset because the clocks also have to be resilient against just abrupt changes. So they have to really make sure that the changes are happening.
So, being a tech person, I want to see how now there is technology use here. Is there some sensing technology that kind of outside of a sleep cycle on a full day cycle, kind of can give you indications of how in sync the clocks are and where you should be.
Yeah, so this is a $1 billion question, right? So, now the question is, okay, so what all can we measure on a day-to-day basis, and then maybe figure out where you are. So there are many things that change on a circadian basis, but many of them are also affected easily by other factors, starting from skin temperature.
Yeah.
So our skin temperature, our core body temperature falls during sleep, but our skin temperature rises during sleep. So accordingly, you will have a circadian rhythm in skin temperature. So if you have a wearable that is sensing your skin temperature, you can see some sign of that rhythm. And now the heart rate should actually go down towards in the middle of our sleep. So you can also measure heart rate. Your breathing frequency will also change. And of course, the sleep wake cycle that you're also measuring.
But I guess somewhere going beyond to some indirect sensors for hormonal dysfunction, I guess, would be the real
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, hormones are difficult because right
Yeah.
now, if you talk about the only thing we can reliably measure is glucose because it's in millimolar concentration. But then if you look at hormones, hormones are in nanomolar or femtomolars. And many hormones also spike. So, for example, growth hormone spikes 4 or 5 times in the first half of our sleep. And your sampling frequency has to be very frequent to capture those spikes.
As a fundamental challenge is that how frequently can we sample?
Yes.
And as long as that technology limitation stays, we will always be struggling to make this synchronous recording a challenge. That brings the question about what we run this podcast for. How do you see these clocks, asynchrony or desynchronous behavior of this clock affecting aging in the long run, or signs of aging or pathologies or inflammation? If you have to bet on some markers to record asynchronous behavior, at what time points and what are those markers be based on your understanding?
Yeah, so the first question is if you have disrupted circadian rhythm,
Yes.
are we likely to live less?
Yes, or bad quality
Or
life.
bad quality life. And, for ethical reason, we cannot actually bring people and put them in fully lighted room or disrupt their sleep. But in animals, what we have said is, yes, that's true. So, for example, if you take relatively old rats and give them a 6 hours jet lag every single week, uh,
They
and they will die within 7 or 8 weeks. Is that that's very harsh. And then there are other cases where if you disrupt circadian rhythm chronically, just like this, in younger animals, in combination with bad diet, then they will develop liver disease, gut disease, all these diseases. In humans, if you bring healthy humans and then disrupt their circadian rhythm or reduce their sleep to from 8 hours to say 5 hours or less, then within a week or so, they will develop sign of pre-diabetes.
all the shift worker studies.
Yeah, even healthy human, if you bring and just for 1 week, if you reduce. So these are some of the interesting facts from humans, from animals that connect that are intervention and their causality. And then you have, correlation. So that comes mostly from shift workers. Shift workers are more likely are at a higher risk for certain type of cancer, endometrial cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer. Um, so that's why shift work is considered as a class 4 carcinogen.
So is the this disruption of the cycle aggravated in shift workers, or you think this could happen to anybody? So let's say even the non-shift worker, a normal person who's disrupting their cycle, is there a carcinogenic uh,
Yeah, so
occasion?
the question is, what is the definition of shift work? Right. So it doesn't mean that somebody has to actually go to work and then work in an assembly line in a factory or be a nurse. The fundamental thing that happens to us is in shift work, we're staying awake for 2 or more hours during our habitual sleep time and are engaged in some activity. We're not just lying in the bed, eyes open. That's not shift work, but so now if we apply the definition, then almost every high school student or college student becomes a shift worker because they have irregular sleep wake cycle and they're sleepless. Every new mother is a shift worker. Actually, they're worse because the shift workers get days off. The new moms never get a day off. So then the question is, are they more prone to disease? And yes, for example, new moms have postpartum depression. Yes, and there are also postpartum diabetes and um, some aggravation of
related to sleep using.
yeah, so that might be due to few things, sleep disruption, and also they're less exposed to daylight because daylight is the biggest synchronizer of brain clock, and also daylight elevates mood and reduces depression. So similarly, for college students and high school students, what we are seeing now is that a more high risk from brain health issues, depression, anxiety, and also in the US, at least, I know there is data showing that teenagers are seeing a very rapid rise in irritable bowel syndrome (IBS), not IBD, IBS. Yeah. So that and then young women post puberty, they're also finding irregular menstrual cycles. So those are widespread. So those things also happen if you disrupt circadian rhythm in animals in laboratory conditions. So I guess in that way, shift work. Yes, maybe 50 years ago, the only people who were staying awake were shift.
But the blue definition, yeah.
When you are even in a shift worker, yes. All of us are technically shift workers.
All of us are technically shift workers. So that's the question: is which kind of shift worker are you?
That's very interesting. Yeah,
And then where is that tipping point, right? So because that's the research that
Yeah. So the definition now, International Labour Organization has somewhere written that if you stay awake for 2 or more hours, and then for 50 days in a year, so once a week, even if you do that, that's everybody in the that's almost everybody.
that's why everybody gets cancer.
Yeah. So now that's very interesting. And this brings to something very fascinating. The magic bullet for everybody these days is fix what you eat. So everybody thinks, can you do a time restricted eating, or you pick up certain food or certain types of food or nutrition supplement. How much these things would affect circadian rhythm, which is disordered because of this change in our time shifts? As you said, 2 hours is sufficient.
So things like muscle
Yeah.
sensing for nutrition and those kinds of things,
Yeah.
right?
So I think in broad sense, when we say lifestyle, it's a lot of different things, but we can simplify it to 9 different elements. So it's the quality, quantity, and timing of exercise, sleep, and food. And that is lifestyle. So in that way, yes, nutrition is very important, and we should be eating healthy food. But at the same time, just like your best friend, if he or she comes and knocks on your door at 2 o'clock in the morning, then that person is no longer your best friend.
That's interesting.
So that's why healthy food at the wrong time can be junk.
So there is no solution. Are you saying that we can fix our dysregulated circadian clocks
I won't say
by just food?
I won't say we cannot. We can maybe lessen the burden of this. Not as a yeah. So we can. So we did one study with firefighters in the US who do 24-hour shifts. They got from 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. next day, and they do 1 day on, 1 day off. They do 4 cycles that way, and then 4 days off. So for them, you cannot force them to sleep, right? And you also cannot take away light because they have to work in light and all that stuff. So then we said, okay, so can you do time restricted eating of 10 hours of your choosing? We don't say what time. And they chose more or less say 8 or 9 a.m. eating time. They begin eating between 8 and 9 and ended between 6 and 7. And we are really anxious and we're fearful that if they are staying 14 hours overnight without food, and if they're getting emergency call, 911 emergency call, can they be effective? And the answer was no, they were completely effective. There was no change in response time. They could still go to 8 or 9 calls every single night whenever they're in busy station. And so that says that you actually don't have to eat all the time to actually do your job. And second is what they reported was interesting. When they got back from a call or on the off days, they could sleep much better when they were doing
because of this.
yeah. And then since the eating stopped at says 6 or 7, we also saw there was a significant reduction in alcohol intake. Because many of these firefighters, they are under high stress.
Yes.
Sometimes they consume alcohol, and that alcohol intake went down. And those who had high blood pressure, high sugar, or high cholesterol, they also reduced, and their mental health improved. So that was one example where your sleep circadian rhythm is disrupted and is part of your job.
But if you keep your food timing, you still
You can still improve.
Very
So that was really exciting and interesting to see.
So I guess there's this on food timing.
Yeah.
There's this continuous questions that all of us get asked on breakfast.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. And I mean, you talk to 10 different experts. Everybody has a view that okay, it's the period that matters. It's not. But from what you are saying, it really matters that there is that optimal window, and it's not just shifting of the window is
No.
not necessarily.
And not just the portions also. Yeah, I think what a lot of people assume that if we eat smaller portions of healthy food, it is okay.
More than then you're this OMD,
Yeah.
1 meal a day, and that's why. So there is this all the but just to simplify it, you would still say that based on your understanding of organ clocks and readiness for sensing nutrition and consuming nutrition at the organ level, early time restricted eating is more beneficial.
Well, there is no conclusive study showing early versus late is better, but there are some implications. So, for example, everybody is eating breakfast because breaking the fast, you actually break the fast, right?
Depends on what time.
Yeah, what time, and whether you have actually fasted enough. Because because if your last meal was at 2 a.m. in the morning and then you are eating something at 6 a.m., then that's not breaking your fast. So what we what our body is designed is to actually experience at least 12 hours without food. The reason is the last time you eat your food, for example, if I'm having my last bite at 7 p.m., although my mouth finished its work, actually my stomach is still digesting that food for the next 5 hours. So that means my stomach gets to sleep at midnight. And stomach is not actually sleeping, so that's when the gut lining is repaired every single day. We damage 6 to 7% of our gut lining, and that lining gets repaired when we sleep and when growth hormone is released,
Right.
and that repair process happens. And that repair can take up to 7 to 8 hours, so that's why you have 7 hours, 5 hours, and at least 12 hours, right? And then for some people, the digestion process can be a little slow or fast. So that's why
just 14 hours.
14 hours is a decent number. So that's why your breakfast should be 14 hours after your last meal. So then you do another math, that is, you should eat your last meal or dinner at least 3 hours before your sleep, because that helps you with sleep. And you are in bed for 8 hours. So 8 plus 3, 11 hours. So in the morning, so that means after waking up, you should wait at least an hour or more for your next meal or breaking your fast. So now the question is, after waking up, if you wait for noon or maybe 2 o'clock, then what time do you sleep? So no. Suppose say 1 meal a day, or suppose say you start eating at 2 o'clock or noon, and you still finish at 7 or 8, and you're going to bed at 11. How does it affect your? And is it more beneficial or less beneficial? That argument is still there. And there is a different kind of question. So then the question is, from morning till 2 o'clock, what are you doing? What are you drinking? And many people will say that they're drinking coffee and then black coffee and green tea. So now, if you think about it, black coffee may be okay on a few days, but if you talk to people who have been doing that for years, then many of them actually develop acid reflux and esophageal disorders after many years. And in fact, if you go back to the history of breakfast, or history of coffee in Istanbul, when coffee was introduced first, coffee was an evening drink,
Right.
for people to stay awake. But then, to make a long story short, people figured out that if they wake up and drink coffee, they can stay awake for the first prayer in Islam. So then people woke up and had coffee and then did the fast prayer, and life was okay for a while. And then they realized that they have acid reflux because Turkish coffee is very thick.
Yeah.
And then, to kind of dilute down the effect of coffee, they had food before coffee. And literally, in Turkish language, the meaning of breakfast means food before coffee. So,
That's very interesting. Actually, brings to a very interesting historical context. I really do not know if it's true or not. There was an interesting study which suggested that for a longest part of the human life, there were two sleep cycles in the night. And people used to wake up somewhere in the middle, or there is a paw fatma, they call it in Hindi, somewhere before the sun rises. And they will do some activities, eat some food, and go back to sleep again. Over the years, that habit has seemed to have disappeared. There, we don't find much discussion about that. But do you think there are two stages of sleep in which our body actually goes to relaxation and wake up, or there is one uninterrupted sleep which has got the maximum value?
yeah, so I know that, that this is historical perspective, right?
Yeah.
So, history, you have to take something with some grain of salt, and you ask yourself. So, for example, um, if you go back to history in old days, people might have had acid reflux
Yeah.
at night time. Can we say that acid reflux is good for you? So similarly, sleep. If you ask many older people, even I was experiencing that. If I eat very close to my sleep time, bedtime, then I would wake up at 3 o'clock and I would be awake for 1 hour, and then I would go back to sleep. And what would I do if I wake up at 3 o'clock? Sometimes I would go back to work, check my emails, reply, and all that stuff, and then go back to sleep. And when I started timeless eating and I stopped eating 3 hours before bedtime, then I got my consolidated 7 hours or so sleep. I won't wake up.
So that's a very interesting view that it was actually acid reflux which was waking them up.
Yeah, some others.
Something was waking them up. So that's one aspect of this story. But the other aspect is it's actually true, particularly for countries that are at a higher latitude.
Yes.
In winter time, since the night is so long, and the cost of lighting a fire or to light up your house was significantly higher. So,
Right.
for example, in 1850, an English household would spend almost 4 to 7 days of their earning to light up all the rooms in the house, 3 rooms or 4 rooms, for 2 to 3 hours in the evening. So the cost of lighting was very high. So when the night is 16 hours,
Yeah. What then?
then of course, when you have to leave
The split it. Yeah.
and then you wake up and do certain things, the kids are still sleeping. So you are not spending lighting for kids. You do some activities and then go back to sleep. But I think if you go plus or minus 23 or 30-degree equator, then I don't think disappears. Yeah, I don't think there's enough reason for people to go to bed early, because if you go back to even in India, some of the rural population, I had the privilege and fortune that my paternal grandfather did not have electricity even up to when I was seventh grade or so. So I would go back to my village, and my grandfather was a farmer. He would actually go to the field, come back. He was very tired, so in the evening he would, by 6:30 or 7, he would go for a evening nap, and by 9 o'clock he would wake up, have his dinner, and then go back to sleep. And would wake up at 4:30, and then get ready for the field. So that was a different way of biphasic sleep. And I think that might have happened in many cultures, in many places, because of the lack of light in the evening. And it was expensive to light up.
So it's more about necessity than the circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting viewpoint.
Talking, maybe about just this biphasal. Uh, naps in general, I think there's now enough agreement that these short naps are energizing and
Power
useful.
naps, power naps.
Is there enough any data on that, or is there? It's just still anecdotal.
No, I think the question is, so when we all have circadian rhythm, and we know that we are humans are mostly day active or diurnal, and mice are night active or nocturnal. But actually, on a fine grain, there are many variations to be taken. So there are also animals who are only active in the twilight zone.
Yes.
And for example, there are many insects and even mosquitoes are more active in the evening and also in the morning. So that's one extreme. Um, whereas humans, we're actually kind of crepuscular. So that means we have a midday dip in our alertness and we're programmed to take a nap after lunch. So we are not purely diurnal. We
Called by various names. Yes, the womb.
So it's like there is enough of the biology around that. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So it's the circadian rhythm. We basically say after food, nap, in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Is it, the anecdotal evidence says yes, because the blood flow is here, the brain is milder and lighter, and is it linked to circadian rhythm, or is it basically linked to our food habits?
No, it's linked to okay. So there is there is sleep pressure,
Yeah.
and then there is a circadian component. The sleep pressure is lowest when we wake up because there is less. We just woke up, and then sleep pressure continue to rise. But even though sleep pressure is continuing to rise, since it's not time yet, circadian clock is not telling you to sleep, then we tend to sleep in the evening. But actually, there is another phase in the late afternoon when the sleep pressure slightly bumps up. So that's why we are programmed to take a nap. But coming back to your point, yes, when we eat, nearly 25% of our blood circulation goes towards digestion. So our blood circulation to the brain slows down. And it's very profound for people who are eating a high carb diet. So then the question is, and this becomes more important in certain cases. So for example, after COVID, there are many post-COVID patients. They would have uh, as soon as they get up from the chair, their heart rate would go up, and they could not even climb the stairs. And some people could not walk because of this. This is called postural orthostatic tachycardial syndrome. Right. And our hypothesis is, well, if since every time you eat, your blood flow goes down to the brain, and that might be triggering this high heart rate. So hypothesis is if you reduce the eating time to 8 to 10 hours and also increase your protein intake, then can you reduce amount of blood going to your stomach and still maintain blood flow to the brain? Right. And we actually did a study and it's under review. The answer is yes. Many POTS patients can much better regulate their blood through heart rate with just time restricted eating, not with so the protein component we are going to add in the next talk of.
I mean, that's interesting.
No, so there's one before we get to the rapid fire.
Yeah,
Right.
a few more.
A few more.
Yes.
So I think there was this question we had on linkages to various pathologies.
Yeah.
Right. More. Uh, uh, I mean, one is pathologies, and second is lifestyle events like fertility. So, is there any research now on some of these specific life stage related events in circadian?
Yeah, so when it comes to fertility, particularly for women's health, there are a lot of studies done in mice, and also now there are more studies done, correlation studies done in humans. So the point is, if there is circadian rhythm disruption, just like chronic jet lag paradigm or long daytime in mice or constant light, then the in mice don't have menstrual cycle, but they do have estrous cycle. The estrous cycle becomes very irregular. Right. And then the ability to conceive is also reduced. And when these mice conceive, then they have a high risk for miscarriages. Good. And then the litter size is small. So now, if you go back to humans, there is also now studies showing that pregnant women who are doing shift work or living the lifestyle of a shift work, they have a higher risk for miscarriages and preterm birth. There is also evidence that since shift workers and people who live the lifestyle of a shift work, they have irregular menstrual cycles, so that also reduces their ability to conceive at the right time. And so that's why a lot of infertility might be linked to circadian rhythm disruption. So that's why we're trying to see whether time restricted eating, regular sleep can actually be a preconditioning state for women who want to get pregnant.
Perfect.
Then to maintain a healthy pregnancy and to prevent miscarriages and preterm birth, can they maintain regular sleep with pattern and time?
Will it
Time
take
restricted eating will be a little bit difficult because they need higher energy intake. That has to be over 12 hours. But still, 12 hours is long enough here to eat. Yeah.
I have one quick question to
Yeah.
you, and this is something which always fascinated me. In every household, every class, which because being a teacher, it's always somebody who said, "I'm a night person.
Yeah.
I'm not a day person." Does this thing actually exist, or it is a matter of convenience or matter of habit, where people end up calling themselves night person or day person?
Yeah, so there are genetic predisposition to be night owl or early bird, but that the frequency of that genetic predisposition is very low, 1 in 300 or so. Whereas you will see almost 1 in 3
So,
people.
what exactly you mean by genetic night owl? So, can I be genetically hardwired to be a person who functions better at night? That means my circadian clock is flipped over.
Yeah, so what happens is there is a mutation in period gene,
Okay.
the one we talked about, and that makes people to go to bed very early. Very early means they cannot stay awake even until 9 o'clock. They will fall asleep before 9. To the extent that even if you put them in the gym in the middle of a workout, they will feel so sleepy that they cannot continue their work.
That's interesting.
But at the same time, the same familial, we call it familial advanced sleep phase syndrome. So these patients also have severe migraine, many of them, and they have other things. The typical night owls are very difficult to dissect a genetic factor because many of our lifestyle pushes us to be night owls. So, for example, if your ability to break down caffeine is very low and you are consuming more than 100 milligram of caffeine, which is very easy these days, then you're likely to stay awake for a very long time.
And but that's like dysregulated circadian rhythm. But is there something indeed called a night owl?
Yeah, so there are
Not the mutant type, which is basically this pathological mutation. But
yeah.
for a normal population, is there? Do you think it's a lifestyle driven night or a choice, or there's actual?
I think it's a lifestyle driven because lifestyle and genetics to some extent. So, for example, when I say somebody has less tolerance for caffeine, so that comes from the enzyme cell breakdown. Okay. Similarly, more sensitivity to light. So, there's a genetic system that senses and then trend light is different. So that
there are many other dynamics beyond just the period.
just the periods.
So if somebody wants to realign the circadian rhythm, we just cannot rely on one feature. You look at this caffeine breakdown as efficiency, sensitivity to light, looking at the metabolic progress, the sleep cycle. So there is multi-factor data to be accumulated to understand what causes the dysregulation. That's fascinating point.
But I guess one can do a very simple experiment. So, for example, I also do the experiment once every year. So, between Thanksgiving, end of November till beginning of January, I stop caffeine. And then I actually realized that although every day I go to sleep between say 10:30 and 11:30, when I stop caffeine, I feel sleepy between 9 and 9:30.
And so there is so
And then second is, of course, in our house, all the lights are dim light. But people who have very bright light, and actually in India, what I'm seeing is almost every household has very bright, rich LED light, and nobody has dimmers. So you can do a very simple experiment. You take out all the room lighting, and then have your table lamps light up your rooms, and
That increases the sleep.
that increases sleep pressure. Or just use blue filtering, funky looking orange sunglasses.
Yes, I know. I was going to ask you that, but anyway, but looks like it's simpler if you could just turn down the noise.
Yeah, but it's difficult because the kids are
Everybody
because
very
if you're alone, then it's okay to experiment. So that's why.
That's quite interesting because when you go many times to the shop to buy up a night light, most of them are blue.
Yeah.
So it's an absolutely a bad idea in that case. So you should look out for red lights, right? And but nobody talks us about those things. So this is really interesting.
So the question I wanted to ask is about startups.
Yeah.
And you have, of course, being in California, you can't be away from startups for too long, right? Just like being in Bangalore, you can't be away from startups here. So what have been some of your experiments where you've either um, translated some of your research into a startup idea or just supported a startup idea?
Yeah, when we started the My Circadian Clock app, it's all research. It's HIPAA compliant, so people can freely download. But then, since we have collected huge amount of data and we know how to change people's behavior towards better circadian rhythm through the app and many iterations of it, so then there is this idea that okay, so can we have an app and to guide people for circadian optimization for specific conditions. So maybe for diabetes is slightly different than say shift workers or for people who are going through cancer treatment or cancer prehab or cardiac rehab. So we started a small startup under Circadian Biosystem Sync. We have an app called On Time Health. It's mostly out of UK and because my co-founder is in London, so we're doing that. But
Is the app on the App Store?
yeah, it's on the App Store. We actually have paid,
On time.
yeah, On Time Health, and we have paid customers all over the world. But beyond that, I have not spent too much time on this stuff because when the research is going. Now, I guess I have a slightly different way of looking at it because in circadian rhythm field, there are very few people who are doing this research. Right. If you take all circadian rhythm researchers around the world, it will be less than 250 people or so. Whereas in cancer, a single university can have 250 people.
Cancer is an outlier in many ways. Yes.
So that's why I think that I have a responsibility from taxpayers' point of view to continue my research. And then I think it's gratifying to see that almost every lifestyle intervention, longevity plan, whatever you call it, uh, have now adopted the circadian optimization as one of the foundations.
Yes. So it's more a plug-in to an overall.
Yeah, it's
than
a plug-in.
Yeah, it's a plug-in and a necessary plug-in.
It's a necessary plug-in, just like you cannot talk about infectious disease without sanitation.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot think of increasing longevity or increasing human performance without circadian rhythm optimization.
It has to be accounted for.
It has to be accounted for. So now the question is, okay, can I bring in some specific insight to personalize
Yes.
and then find touch point where you can change circadian rhythm? Because it's a lifestyle and lifestyles are very difficult to change because we're wedded to our existing lifestyle for a very long time. People actually they say, well, this is our culture, this is what we do.
They take pride in that.
We take pride in that, and then we say, okay, without a nightcap or a nightshirt or alcohol, I cannot fall asleep.
Or I have to take a siesta at 2 o'clock.
So I think now we have enough because after running this and we have 15 or 16 completed ongoing clinical trials and also nearly 20,000 people who have shared their data, how they're changing their lifestyle. A very rich database of how to optimize. And we are using we are beginning to use some of the AI engine to personalize based on location, geographic location, their lifestyle, their existing condition, what are the limitations, and what food they prefer to eat. All of it.
So we should look at that research app and instance here in India, and see if we can spin up, five. What's you think a sample size that is meaningful to
yeah, so it all,
the data that is whatever we can then see is the data in sync with the
international references.
yeah. So it all depends on what is your endpoint. So, for example, many of the clinical studies starting from POTS, kidney disease, and if we do a randomized control trial, they if you do the power calculation, you should see some effect between, say, sample size of 80 to 150, 1-to-1 randomization. So that means only 40 or 50 people.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a,
Yeah, that's a lot of data sets which has come in.
yeah. So we should look at
That was something worth trying
what's buying
in Indian context.
especially in the Indian context, and which has relevance here. So maybe we should think among the clinical trials that you've already, because then the design is there, everything is there. You just
The template is just
template is there. You just
Yeah.
replicate, and hopefully the result is the same. Or if there's a nuanced difference,
Yeah.
it's a
I think it's time to go some quick fire questions. We're gonna go rapid fire. We just love this.
yeah. You start the first one.
Yes. So you travel from US.
Yeah.
How do you reset your circadian clock when you travel such a long distance? How do you set your jet lag blues?
Well, the question is, how do I lessen the effect of jet lag? The rule one is eat as little as possible in flight and sleep as much as possible in flight. So I figured out how to sleep even in economy class.
No.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You have to train yourself to sleep, or at least to shut off your mind and close your eyes.
So weakness, sleepless when you land.
And then when you land in the morning, so that's what I was telling, that wherever I go for a morning run around sunrise time, because that's convenient. That's way before anything starts. And then in the arrivals place, again, I have a big breakfast, no lunch, because after lunch you have the postprandial dip. That's why
You want to avoid that.
yeah. And then you go straight to early dinner. And and then in the evening you really have to avoid light, but it's very difficult. So I try to sometimes, rarely I do take some melatonin, but again, I'm pretty sensitive to melatonin, so 1 milligram is enough. And if you take more, then the next day morning you have too much melatonin in your system to abuse.
So one these as also say that. Biological clocks. I know maybe not directly in your wheelhouse, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway. Do you believe that there is any consistency between the different biological clocks?
Even the aging clocks.
Yeah, the biological aging clocks, are they usable at all?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you if you go back to the old physicians who actually look at you and figure out
Yeah.
few questions, they will figure out what disease you have. They were using some kind of practical wisdom based clock, because they will look at you and say, well, you're 40-year-old, but you do have all these conditions. So essentially, we have reduced that to molecular measurements. And I think in that context, the clinical outcomes, because those tests have been standardized and verified so many times on and millions of people, if we take those collection of tests and then see whether that combination gives us a good idea of which organ in our system. So, for example, creatine ratio will give you very clearly whether your kidney is functioning or not. LT-AST will give you very clearly how liver is functioning or not. So, I think those are very practical and actionable ones, and those are easy to relate to physicians. But because at the end of the day, the physicians are the ones who are going to intervene for most people, and to have real impact on population level. People actually believe two P's in their life: the priest and the physician.
Parents.
And I used to say partner, but then some people don't.
So we just skip the other P's, which are okay.
So when it comes to sleep supplements,
Yeah.
right? Which are maybe one or two supplements you really think now you would like really stand by, and one or two that are really overhyped and still nonsense.
It's really hard to say, because there was a nice article a few years ago from Nick Sark showing that for every among the top 10 best-selling drugs in the US, for every person they help, there are 3 to 24 people who don't benefit from that drug. But still, they're sold, they have gone through clinical trials and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, just like we have a preference of which painkiller works for us, we have to do experiment on which sleep supplement works for us in a way that we don't feel groggy the next morning. So that's why I say you have to be when you're talking about personalized health, the person has to do some experiment on themselves.
So there is no general magic pill.
Yeah. So, for example, even if take melatonin, some people are so sensitive to that 0.3 milligram of melatonin will knock them down. They will sleep, and some need 1 milligram. And I know a few people even in this conference that they tried 15 milligram and nothing happens.
Same here. It is another Tommy. Yeah. But how about chamomile tea? The world's favorite sleep-inducing, time-tested. Does it work?
I think for some people it's so boring that it makes them.
I know. And it's a brilliant answer. That's a brilliant. Or some people, for some, it's just the whole process of making the tea and sipping it, you just end up sleepy.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
So maybe one last question. Is there a stance or a viewpoint that you have changed in the last 5 years?
A lot of viewpoints have changed.
Yeah, one on circadian clocks or any in your life.
Yeah, is there any specific thing that you really have come like a full circle on a 180 degrees?
Yeah, I don't think there are big things like that. I mean, one thing is, for example, yeah, it's really hard to say that there is anything that has changed 180-degree full circle. But I guess one thing I can go back to is the exercise, afternoon exercise for people. I never thought that the afternoon exercise would have an impact on blood glucose and blood pressure. Um, for a long time, there was data that afternoon exercise is good for athletes, and many records are broken. And now afternoon exercise seems to be working much better for some people, but at the same time, it's in conflict with a lot of people who cannot go outdoor in the afternoon.
Right.
So now the question is, exercise at any time of the day is much better than no exercise. So
So is your body primed for exercise in the afternoon is the question.
yeah, the body is primed for exercise so that you have low risk for injury and low risk for fall and other stuff. Um, but at the same time, what is happening is a lot of people are thinking that, well, afternoon exercise is good and I cannot do afternoon exercise, so I should not do exercise. And that's kind of so in the bottom line is that in the pursuit of perfection, don't give up what is good for you.
Perfect. That's perfect ending for our perfect. Very interesting. Right. That's nice to say there. Nice thing to say there. And I think we shall keep this pursuit going for a long way.
Yeah.
And let's hope we can get some collaborations going with Bangalore.
Yeah. Yes.
In the next 1 year, of course. I think
We'll be seeing more of you.
you will, yeah, look forward to.
I'll be jet lagged more frequent.
Well, you've told us the trick.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Deepak. Thank you for being on Biopeak Live, brought to you by Longevity India. See you on the other side. So